Welcome everybody to our Globinar today. I'm Susan Gittenstein-Asadi, and I'm the director of the New York City chapter of the Global Chamber. Our chamber goes beyond other chambers, which usually are dedicated to one city, but we cross states, we cross borders, and we cross continents. Our chapter is a growing arm of the Global Chamber, which has chapters in 525 metro regions everywhere to help members grow anywhere more effectively. We provide connectivity to AI-supported warm introductions to a growing database of over 40 million people. We're doing programs which are all virtual in these pandemic times, such as this one today, and we are educating our members on aspects of how to do business globally and with trusted contacts, which will benefit your respective businesses. Prior to and after the pandemic danger passes, we will return to a hybrid of in-person and virtual presentations. So hopefully that won't last too much longer. So today our program looks at Malaysia as an Asian hub for iconic US companies. And I wanted to contextualize our talk just a little bit. And according to a CNN business story about Asia, Asia's economies are bouncing back. The West is headed in the other direction, unfortunately. Asia's biggest economies have managed to escape prolonged fallout from the coronavirus pandemic, and now they just have to make sure rising cases in the rest of the world don't put their recoveries in jeopardy. Japan reported recently that its economy expanded 5% in the July to September quarter, allowing it to emerge from the recession. That translated to an annual rate of expansion of over 21%, the fastest pace on record for the world's third largest economy. Shortly after that, Japan's announcement, China released data showing that its recovery is also continuing to pick up steam. Industrial production in the world's second largest economy nearly rose 7%. Retail sales rose by slightly more than 4%. That's the fastest pace this year. The promising news out of Asia stands in sharp contrast to the West, where many nations are grappling with the resurgence of COVID-19 and have been forced to once again impose restrictions in an attempt to bring their outbreaks under control. A spokesman for China's National Bureau of Statistics told reporters in Beijing that outbreaks in Europe and the US have created uncertainties for China's exports. Oxford Economics was optimistic. Though weakness in the US and Europe will weigh on trade and investment in Asia, this report said this shouldn't derail those economies entirely. According to the same report, it was cited if Asian economies can continue to avoid major new lockdowns, the impact of weakness in Europe and the US will only soften the continued recovery in Asia, not undo it. Regardless of the state of the pandemic, countries in the region are also attempting to strengthen ties with each other without the aid of the rest of the world. Recently, China, Japan, and more than a dozen other countries in the Asia Pacific signed the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. It's a major trade agreement that has been nearly a decade in the making. And HSBC just said it may reinforce a trend that's been already underway for decades, that the global center of economic gravity keeps pushing relentlessly to the east. So in light of this view of Asia, now let's turn to Malaysia as an Asian hub for iconic US companies. With our three esteemed speakers, we want to first thank our collaborators and members, MIDA, BurgherGray as a member, and the Global Chamber Chapter of Baltimore, Washington, which has been very helpful in helping make this program possible today. And just a few logistics. After our speakers present, we will follow with about 30 minutes of Q&A. I will ask them a few questions, and then please send in your questions via chat or through the Q&A section. I will introduce the speakers by their full name, but sometimes I will refer to them by their first names only, as is a Malaysian cultural tradition. First, we have Mr. Nelson Samuel. He's a director at MIDA, New York City. He joined the Malaysian Investment Development Authority, MIDA, in 1992 with experiences from various sectors in MIDA, covering Industrial Promotion Division, Foreign Investment Promotion Division at the America Desk. He was the Deputy Director in MIDA Tokyo, and in Strategic Planning Division, MIDA, and appointed as the Director of MIDA in Korea, Seoul, Korea. After returning from Korea, Mr. Nelson was appointed as the director of the Foreign Investment Promotion Division, MIDA, which monitors overseas centers for MIDA globally and in attracting foreign direct investment to Malaysia. So thank you, Nelson, and now I'd like to give the floor to you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you very much, and a very good afternoon to all our audience in the United States on the Western side, and all those joining from the other parts of the world as well. And I would like to mention my special thanks to Global Chambers for putting up this event together. It's the Globinar, as how we call it, because we are reaching out an audience, not just in the US, but all over the other parts of the world. So I'm happy to collaborate with the Global Chambers New York chapter, where because I'm based in New York, and Susan has been, and team, and not to mention Doug has been absolutely phenomenal. Thank you very much. And also special thanks to Hershey's Chocolate, Mr. Subhas Viswalingam, who's kind enough to join us as a success story highlighting an iconic US company. Thank you. And with that, I would like to proceed my slides today on the screen. As you can see, it's a growth opportunities highlighted in Malaysia. Today, Malaysia is the focus. And this is where MIDA comes in. We are a one-stop center for foreign direct investments. Basically, why? Because we handle right from marketing, where I am based at right now in the promotion aspect of MIDA, and right up to approvals, giving it a one-stop center of approvals for manufacturing licenses, status approvals for representative regional office tax incentives, which are a very important role to play in attracting foreign investments into Malaysia, and even visa facilitation for key expatriates coming into Malaysia, and coupling that up with the customs duty exemptions, all in one package that you can get from MIDA, which is under the Ministry of the International Trade and Industry Malaysia. We are the federal government basically overlooking at the growth of foreign direct investments. Next slide. These are basically the offices network in the world. Today we have 20 overseas offices. Thanks, Susan, for mentioning my previous assignments that I was based in Japan and Korea at one point of time in my career. And right now I'm in New York in USA, which are also joined by my colleagues from San Jose and Chicago. Today, looking at targeting US companies, iconic companies, as well as small and medium-sized companies into Malaysia. Next slide. So here's a country profile of Malaysia. Basically, I'm taking this opportunity to introduce Malaysia, basically as coming from the federal government. So Malaysia is a small population of 32 million, but we would like to always project ourselves as a hub, regional hub in the center of a booming, young and vibrant growing population in Southeast Asia, which is totaling almost 650 million. So that's the story. That's the angle of Malaysia today. Many investors choose Malaysia not just for the local market, but actually looking at trying to project and grow their investments in Malaysia for an export market, outreaching into Southeast Asia and also the rest of Asia region. As you rightfully say, the businesses are basically growing in that part of the world. So Malaysia has been basically right in the middle of all those action. We have a GDP growth rate of an average of 4.8%, notwithstanding what's happening right now in 2020 as how most economies are impacted. But this has been the general numbers. Unemployment rate is 3.4% overall. But of course, this year we envisage probably a hike in unemployment rate due to the lockdown that we have experienced unavoidably in the early part of the year in 2020. On the right side of the slide, this is where I would like to highlight Global Talent Competitiveness Index. If you look at the score, Malaysia scored well in this index, basically in the 2020 report, where we came out 26th position out of 130 over economies. We rose from 29th previously in 2019 to 26. We were the best in middle upper income countries and scored high points in employability, ease of finding skilled employees in Malaysia, and availability of scientists and engineers. A lot of us are basically educated, and we are therefore basically potential to offer talented labor. And MIDA also plays an important role in this aspect, where we have even a talent division in-house to actually help potential new investors coming in with their requirements for manufacturing or even within the services sectors. Next slide, please. Yeah, so these are challenges they are facing right now. As you have mentioned earlier as well, a lot of economies are impacted by the pandemic. I think Malaysia is no exception. Global FDI inflows are basically fell 49% the first half. And back in Malaysia, our central bank has even predicted a range between 3.5% to minus 5.5% range for 2020. This is unavoidable, of course. But moving forward in 2021, what's good news is the Ministry of Finance has projected better forecast between 6 to 7. What happens is when you always plunge down or you drop down, you pick up fast. And being Malaysia a very global trading nation and as well as a manufacturing center in Southeast Asia, I think this bodes well for our economy. And on the right side, you can take a look at the FDI investment. Despite the pandemic, approved foreign investments for the January to September 2020 alone recorded an increase of 16% to $15.9 billion. This is fresh out of in the news, announced by the Minister of International Trade, and it's a good sign compared to the corresponding period last year. Next slide, please. This is basically to show you the business-friendly policies that we adopt for foreign investors. We are allowing 100% foreign ownership for anyone interested to come in the manufacturing sector today, and even selected services sector. We allow free income repatriation of basically capital dividends and profits. There's no restriction whatsoever for money coming in and out. We facilitate visa. We have free trade agreements with a lot of countries in the world, 7 bilaterally, 6 regionally. You mentioned RCEP. Yes, that's true. That's the most latest one that was kicked off in November 2020, and currently under negotiation is with the EU and even pending ratification with CPTPP. And we are also the member of the World Intellectual Property Organization today and have investment guarantee agreements with more than 60 countries, which gives them the confidence in investing in Malaysia. Next slide. So this is just to show you quickly and approve investments in the economy from the US. You can see well, US had a very good investment 10 years ago, and then things got to a downturn, but we picked up in 2019. If you look at the graph, 2019 on the right, and this year, first half 2020, again, I want to amplify with this pandemic, we managed to get almost $500 million of worth of investments from US alone in the first half. Next slide. These are the strong presence of US investments in Malaysia. They are ranked as second in terms of realized investments. Earlier on, I was talking to you on approved investments, but this particular one shows you the actual capex, the actual realized investments in the economy in Malaysia in the manufacturing sector. We are second today after Japan. US is about $21 billion. Look at the iconic companies that I've listed in the graph in this slide. You can see Intel is leading US investments, undoubtedly the largest investor from America, followed by Western Digital, Honeywell, and of course, Boston Scientific in medical devices, and Coca-Cola, another iconic company which has a bottling manufacturing plant in Malaysia. And I saved the best for the last, of course, Hershey's company, the Hershey company that Subhas will be talking about after me. Next one. Next slide. Yeah, this is to show you the new, what I was talking to you about in the first half of 2020. Who are those guys that invested in Malaysia today? From a new company from America, which is Lam Research, basically headquartered in California, announced their new manufacturing facility in Penang, the northern region of Malaysia, basically. And we are working on them to implement the project. And then we have Dexcom, another US company headquartered in San Diego, California, which have basically announced their third manufacturing site in the world for continuous glucose monitoring systems in the manufacturing sector in Malaysia. And of course, we have Keysight Technologies. This is an existing company in Malaysia which have continued to expand. So what I'm trying to say is the government is facilitating not just new investments, we are also looking at existing companies to grow in Malaysia, basically, and expand their manufacturing site. Next slide, please. Yeah, these are growth opportunities that I want to highlight in Malaysia today in the manufacturing sector and services. US is basically, I want to take a bit of time here. US is basically, we are looking at high technology. That is the expertise we want to attract from the US. And these are sectors that they have developed definitely strengths and capabilities in advanced electronics, medical device, machinery, and aerospace, to name a few, not to mention food technology, as well as pharmaceuticals and specialty chemicals. So we want to continue looking at these sectors to grow their businesses in Malaysia, followed by the services sector. The services sector is the largest GDP contributor for Malaysia, as in the case for most economies in the world. So we won't want to leave out this as well. And we look at green technology, ICT services, and e-commerce, which is lately been booming in ASEAN region. What more with the pandemic right now, I think many people are doing businesses online. So these are really good growth opportunities for you to take a look at. Next, Cesar. So I don't want to look at delve into this slide too much. I'm running behind time a bit, but these are options for you to look at. Basically, to come into Malaysia, you can either look at a feasibility study office, which MIDA can facilitate for 2 years initially, and we can even continue approving it. Some sort of a regional office, non-profit orientation office, basically to look at market. And then before you go on into manufacturing facilities or even establishing a regional headquarters. Now, some companies did not do this in the first step. They just go straight right ahead into establishing a manufacturing facility, which you also can opt for. Next slide. So tax incentives is another slide I want to spend some time here. Basically, as I said earlier, this is one of a compelling factor, but not the whole factor for you to decide a business. But what I'm trying to say, the Malaysian government has been taking a lot of efforts to look at this particular facilitation by giving tax exemption between 5 to 10 years for any potential companies coming in, categorizing their activity under general category, high tech, or strategic. You can see on the slide, we have those partial exemption, 70% of corporate tax exemption. By the way, the corporate tax is 24% in Malaysia. It's a fixed rate. So if you qualify for this incentive, you can probably pay lesser amount to the government. Or if you qualify for a 100% exemption, you end up paying nothing at all. So this basically is a good package that we have been in place for many years until now, and we are still continuing to do that. Next slide. So it's coming closely to an end. Before I finish, I want to highlight that this gentleman over there in the slide is our current Prime Minister of Malaysia. So he has announced on 5th of June this year, attractive, again, incentive package for relocation of projects around the world to Malaysia. As we all know, the pandemic has caused the global supply chain disruption. So taking advantage of this, Malaysia is in a good position to offer very good incentive package between 10 to 15 years without paying any tax at all for any capex investments between USD 70 million to USD 120 million for new projects. And for those who are existing, we are not forgetting them as well. We are looking at basically facilitating them with a 5-year tax exemption. Moving on is the latest budget 2021 tax incentive, which was announced in November again by the government. And these are, I did not put a lot on this budget. It's an expansionary budget. It's trying to get Malaysia out of the economic recession. But highlighting here is some tax incentives, which are including pharmaceutical products, global trading centers, and an extension of tax incentive for the services sector. Just now I mentioned about manufacturing. Now it's extending to services. I welcome any questions during the Q&A. Next slide. just to show you and finish it off, is our facilitation for the business travelers. A lot of them are impacted by the pandemic. Traveling in and out is not easy. It's a nightmare, basically with a lot of restrictions. But the government, through MIDA and MITI, Ministry of Trade, as well as Immigration and Ministry of Health, has came out with a green lane facilitation to offer for investors looking to finalize their investment decision into Malaysia, how to assist them in the entry point, right up into going and visiting the site location and meeting companies and facilitating them throughout. So this is a new initiative created by the government since 2nd October, and we welcome any questions further than that. With that, the last slide will show me the contact details of myself, as I'm based in MIDA, New York, and probably all of you may want to reach out. Thank you, Susan. Thank you very much. I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Nelson. That was excellent presentation. Okay, well, now we turn to Miss Renee Tiun. She's a paralegal at BurgherGray out of the DC office, and she works in the tax practice, which will be relevant to what we already heard from Nelson regarding the incentives from the Prime Minister. She's involved in domestic and cross-border tax planning and advisory to corporations and individual U.S. taxpayers. Renee began her career in the U.S. in 2018 and has since developed a passion for U.S. international taxation law. She attributes it to her experience and fascination as a foreign-trained attorney in the U.S. navigating an entirely new legal system as compared to the Malaysian legal system. She earned her Bachelor of Law in Malaysia in 2009. So now I'd like to turn to you, Renee, for your presentation. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Global Chambers, for putting this together. And I'm very honored to be here with my fellow Malaysians to promote Malaysia as an ideal Asian hub for US companies. Next slide. A little bit about me. As Susan has mentioned, I am indeed homegrown in Malaysia and started my career in Malaysia having almost a decade of experience in as a civil litigation lawyer. And I am currently in BurgherGray in Washington, DC as part of the tax practice team. And we have extensive experience in cross-border corporate and individual tax planning. And we routinely handle international business taxation, income sourcing, etc., and working with other professionals like lawyers and accountants from other countries to ensure global tax rate efficiencies for our clients. And I believe this is where we can add value to any potential investments in US investments in Malaysia with regards to cross-border taxation. Next, please. I am also very honored to represent the young workforce, as mentioned by both Nelson and Subhas in their previous slides. I believe there is a spirit amongst us as the first generation in the working force after the independence of Malaysia. All of us are right now grown up, and we are definitely working hard to strive to better our lives and to contribute as much as we can to our country. As there is an American dream, I believe in every one of us, there is also a Malaysian dream. And also briefly touched by both my speakers, we are multilingual. And we also usually speak our ethnic languages. So it is not hard to find a Malaysian with 3 speaking language capabilities. And the multicultural facade of Malaysia, I believe, is a very important tool and valuable tool in the Malaysian workforce to adapt and be versatile in any working environment, because we are used to embrace and accept the different cultures. And this is why we would strive in any foreign or multinational companies that wish to invest in Malaysia. So I believe we would add much value in that sense. Next slide. Briefly, with regards to companies in the law of companies in Malaysia, the New Companies Act 2016 Malaysia came in force in 2017. And with this act, it actually simplified and streamlined the incorporation process in Malaysia, making it the same for both domestic and foreign private limited companies, which is in Malaysia, we call it Sendirian Berhad. And Nelson has briefly touched on the industries in which the Malaysian government has opened up, allowing 100% foreign-owned ownership. I would like to also emphasize here that MIDA is a great one-stop agency to make sure that any investments or any business looking to invest in Malaysia start off on the correct feet. And next slide. As I am from the taxation practice, I would like to briefly touch on the taxation of Malaysia versus the USA. Malaysia is a territorial taxation system, so you are only taxed on income earned in Malaysia or paid in Malaysia. Any foreign sourced income is not taxed, regardless of your residency status or regardless of a corporation's residency status. Corporations are also subject to only a single tier tax system. This is good news because then dividends and capital gains distributed are exempt from Malaysian tax. As Nelson has mentioned, dividend and capital gains are not taxed, and this includes the repatriation of dividend income out of Malaysia. And next we look to US. Next slide, please. So all US citizen or resident alien of US are taxed on worldwide income. So if a US person or company holding more than a certain percentage of share in a foreign company would incur additional reporting obligations to the IRS of the USA. An example would be the GILTI tax, which was introduced in the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, tax on earnings that exceed a 10% return on a company's invested foreign assets. This is where I would like to highlight that although you may not be subject to taxes in your income in Malaysia due to tax incentives, or it could be from dividend income, it is to be noted that in the US, you have foreign worldwide tax income obligation, and these gains will be taxed in the US. That would be all from me right now. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Renee. That was a great presentation. So we are now blessed with a lot of questions. So Nelson and Renee, I'm going to compile some of the questions that came from our audience, and we only have 15 more minutes. So we're going to go pretty quickly. So don't be surprised. These questions are not the ones that you and I the three of us discussed. All right. So, I mean, they're going to be, a composition of that. So Mr. Nelson, we had discussed generally what are foreign investors' reasons for investing in Malaysia, and more particularly, as asked by Doug Brunke, our esteemed founder, it seems that the new Prime Minister has prioritized foreign investment. You have very big companies you've mentioned in your presentation, like Intel there. Are they reinvesting? And could you walk us through how a smaller firm could see the opportunities and go through the process of evaluation and implementation? Nelson?
Thank you. Thank you, Susan and Doug, for posing the question. I think it's very relevant to our topic today. I'd like to kick off this Q&A session by saying that, like I mentioned earlier, I want to amplify the government is not just looking at new investors. We are also looking at existing investors there. Keep them happy, keep them growing, and guys like Intel, for example, what Doug mentioned, they've been continuing to grow. Specifically, of course, I wouldn't know the details, but on the expansion front, they've been doing a couple of basically expansion plans, not this year, but in recent years. So that's one. Number two, regarding the compelling factors, I think my colleagues, especially Subhas, has mentioned about a lot of factors on why Hershey chose Malaysia. So I don't want to go through that. Basically, that's a main reason Malaysia is having an advantage. I would just want to add to those potpourri of factors mentioned by Subhas and Renee. We also have a local cluster, strong cluster today, supporting cluster. This is going on well, particularly for industries, certain industries that we have developed capabilities and expertise because of our long track record and history in industrial development. We started, Intel, for example, started its footprint in Malaysia 50 years ago in 1970. I was maybe probably just a small kid that time, 1972, if I'm not mistaken, when they first landed in Malaysia. So basically, those days Malaysia were well known for cost competitive location because of cheap labor and cheap land, for example, for a production facility. But nowadays, we are positioning ourselves not just for as a cheap labor or cheap land. We are competitive. Like what Subhas mentioned, our labor rates are competitive today. And we do not want to be positioned as a cheap manufacturing site, but instead the government is emphasizing on selective approach based on the high technology I mentioned, high technology processes that does not depend a lot on manual labor, but instead going more on skilled labor. That's the answer to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nelson. Renee, you spoke in some specifics about tax laws. Can you think of any red flags a U.S. company should think about to make sure they're compliant with those tax laws? You need to unmute.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for the question. Well, I think it's very easy to assume that just because, for example, like a new company may not have immediate revenue for the first year, it is easy to assume that just because you have no revenue, you do not have to file any tax information. But that is not the case, as a lot of foreign-owned tax requirement filing is an informational requirement. So even if you have not earned anything in the first year, you still would have to file the necessary tax forms. And of course, we would be happy to help you with that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Renee. Mr. Nelson, how is the growth for the other U.S. iconic companies you referenced in your presentation, and which sectors are they mainly in? And also I'm adding in Shane Jacobs, one of our participants' question, which sort of links to that. When companies are looking to expand there in Malaysia, talk about the talent pool. I know you mentioned a bit about it, but expand on that. And what industry sectors or types of employees are more in demand? And why are you more competitive in that area than other Southeast Asian countries?
Thank you, Susan, for the question. First off, I also wanted to go back to Doug's question earlier. He asked about small and medium companies or small size companies too, right? I've answered the one on Intel and also how the compelling factors are for foreign companies in Malaysia. But for the medium or small companies, now here's the thing. The government, basically, they do not differentiate foreign investments by just size of investments. We do not differentiate that. You are most welcome today to invest in Malaysia. Either you are a large company, an iconic company, or even a medium-sized company or small company, as long as you fit the bill, as long as you fit the criteria the government wants you to come in. As I said earlier, we are not positioning ourselves as a cost, what you call cheap labor only, but we are looking at high technology and high value-added operations. That's the thing for the government. So today we have companies like US companies. If you want me to give an example, is Cabot Corporation, C-A-B-O-T. They like to position themselves as a medium-sized company, not a large company. They have a facility in Malaysia today in they started off very long time ago in the chemical industry. Now they have expanded further doing higher value-added products into specialty chemicals. So Cabot Corporation basically is in the eastern part of US today. I'm very happy that they are also continuing to grow in Malaysia. Why is that? Because the government facilitates both parts of the size of investments, the large ones as well as the medium-sized or small companies. As long as we have the technology coming into Malaysia, moving up the value chain higher and higher as we go. As you know, we are in ASEAN. We have 10 different economies represented by 10 different member countries of ASEAN. We are competing, but we don't want to make ourselves known for the wrong reasons. 70s was a different game. Right now, we're a different game. So I'm moving now to the next question on talent. I think, as you mentioned, first off, what are the companies in the areas of investments? I've highlighted those logos of iconic companies in my slide presentation earlier. I just want to amplify those were in the manufacturing sector. The next emphasis, I also wanted to let you know that we are looking at service-based industries as well. Today, I'm proud to say we have Bank of America, Citibank operating in Malaysia. We have MetLife and Liberty Mutual also having office establishments in the insurance industry in Malaysia. And we have Chubb Insurance as well, Chubb coming into, just to name a few. We have on and on. I can go long list. It's a long list of US companies out there. But this just to give a flavor of the welcoming approach by the Prime Minister and the Malaysian government leadership in facilitating foreign investments. Moving into talent, just to be online with the policy of adopting and attracting high technology and high value-added projects into Malaysia, we got to fit in with the talent. So Malaysia, I'm proud to say, we have a lot of universities today working with the government and the industries to even produce curriculum and academia in industrial research. And this in turn provides the engineers required by people or folks like Intel. Why do you think Intel is in Malaysia for 50 long years? Because of this basically thriving dynamic relationship between the industry as well as the government, facilitating with the Academy High Institute of Learning. So I'm proud to say engineers are being produced in Malaysia in various aspects, in electronics, in the mechanical engineering, in chemical engineering, in bioscience engineering, to name a few, which represents and is in demand a lot in the manufacturing sector. And then moving forward, right now we are living with this pandemic, and we are looking at how we want to automate and how we want to actually input in data for optimizing production processes. So a lot of data scientists, data analysts, and data crunching numbers people are required by the industries. And we have universities involved in producing these kind of guys for the market demand, as well as ICT, not to forget, and software, as we're moving into our digital phase. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Nelson. All right, I have one question for you, Renee, and then we're going to close with a question to Nelson, if we can stay open for a minute. So, Renee, unmute your thing. There's a question to you about, oh my gosh, where did it go? About directing us to, where is it? Can you direct us to the best source for any taxation for intangible assets? For taxation applies to intangible assets.
Well, this is a large area, a general question. Of course, I would first refer to the IRS website. But if definitely consult a tax consultant, and of course you can come to us, but it is a general question and I won't be able to specifically answer that. But the IRS website should be your first step.
Okay.
With regards to the US side of taxation.
Okay, thank you. I think we're over our time, and we had the wonderful opportunity to have too many questions that we couldn't answer them all. So what I would say to anybody whose question was not answered, although I think Subhas, Nelson, and Renee did a good job of seeing your questions and answering where they could, please feel free to reach out to them directly or through me. I just put my email up, or definitely through Cesar or Doug, and they will forward them to the appropriate person. Thank you, everyone. It was wonderful to put this together. Have a great rest of your day.